At 02:38 hours local time, a 220-pound Warhead came down onto a fuel tanker sitting at the midpoint of a floating roadway. The drones that carried it there had flown 84 miles to reach that one vehicle. Ahead of it, and behind it, stood 30 more, around 420 tons of fuel and ammunition, closed up nose to tail on 20 feet of pontoon deck and the single-lane approach behind it. The tanker did not explode so much as open. Burning fuel went out across the deck in both directions at once, and the column of fire that came off it stood 380 feet over the Syvash, visible 6 miles out across water, flat enough to reflect all of it. The Warhead was the smaller half of that. What Russia was carrying across the bridge was the rest. 9 days earlier, there had been no crossing here at all. Through June, Ukrainian drones had worked along the corridor linking occupied Kherson to Crimea and taken the hard bridges out of service one at a time. Russia responded the way an army with a supply problem always responds. It built something temporary. Pontoon crossings went in at Chonhar and near Henichesk. 2 earthen bypasses were pushed across the low ground, one outside Armyansk on the peninsula and one near the village of Stavki on the mainland. None of it was hidden. None of it could be. This is the Syvash. Shallow saltwater and open flats, no trees, no ridgelines, nothing taller than a truck for miles in any direction. And through those few narrow points ran the entire weight of a southern army. A pontoon crossing is not really a structure. It is a decision, anchored to water. Russia did not get to choose where to put it. It had to go exactly where the old bridge stood, because the approach roads on both banks only ran to that one place. So the location of the next target was written down and handed over by the people who would be driving across it. Ukraine let them build it. An empty pontoon bridge is a line of hollow steel with nothing on it worth a warhead. So the drones stayed on the ground while the sections were floated and the cables were run and the ramps came down on both banks. Russia treated the finished crossing as proof of recovery. The occupation administration in Kherson published new detour routes for drivers into Armyansk. It read as an announcement that the roads were open again. Read from the other side, it was a schedule. The resistance network that had spent weeks logging when the trains ran did not need to learn anything new. It only had to count which convoy was the heavy one and what hour of the night the deck carried the most weight. Because the moment that mattered was never when the bridge was finished. It was the moment a loaded tanker reached the middle of it, with vehicles closed up behind and 20 feet of steel to turn around on. There was no turning around. That was the entire point, and both sides were about to find out how completely. 6 FP2s crossed the coastline at 120 feet in a single file, and they did not turn toward the crossing. They turned to run along it. Each carried 220 pounds, half of what these aircraft had been driving into concrete bridge supports all summer. That was not a shortage. A tanker shell is thin metal, and you do not need a structural warhead to open one. The heavy explosive on this target was already parked on the deck, and Russia had delivered it. Something was waiting on the north bank. Short-range air defense had been pulled up once the pontoons went in, which is exactly what doctrine says to do. Systems in the Tor-family exist for this problem. A tracked vehicle carrying its own radar and its own missiles on one chassis, able to move with the thing it protects, and engage small, low, slow targets that everything larger is too coarse to catch. It is not a leftover. It is the right tool, in the right place, aimed at the right threat. On paper, it can find a drone-sized target, classify it, and put a missile in the air inside single-digit seconds. That number is real. It is also the wrong number, because a Tor is built to defend a point, and the aircraft coming at it were not converging on one. Guarding a gate and guarding a fence are not the same job. Give a man a gate and there is exactly one place worth standing. Give the same man, the same weapon, and a fence. Now there are as many places as the fence is long, and he can only stand at one of them. 500 feet of floating deck, a mile of loaded approach road stacked behind it on each bank, and 6 aircraft flying the length of all of it rather than at any part of it. There was no gate to stand in. There was only a line, and a launcher that had to keep choosing which 100 feet of it to be pointed at. Run the clock anyway. Call it 9 seconds from first return to missile away. Generous, and the system is good enough to earn it. In 9 seconds, an inbound FP2 covers 1,600 feet of that line. 2 of them came apart in the dark. 2 clean kills, and the crew did its job. 4 kept coming. The launcher swung onto the nearest one and got no engagement at all. Not a miss, nothing. And the reason was, sitting 40 yards behind it, running perfectly, reporting that everything was fine. The system was an R-330Zh Zhitel, and it had been on the north bank since the pontoons went in, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Zhitel is not air defense. It never fires anything. It is a jammer built to cut the wires that are not there, the radio link between a drone and whoever is flying it, and the satellite navigation signal telling that drone where on Earth it is. Against a quadcopter with a pilot 2 miles away, it is close to decisive. Take the link, and the aircraft is a brick with propellers. Against something that has already been told where it is going, it is a different story. An FP2 does not phone home. Its route is loaded before it leaves the ground, and it flies that route on internal reference. Dead reckoning, the same trick a ship's navigator used for 400 years before satellites existed. Speed, heading, elapsed time. No signal in, no signal out, nothing to interrupt. So Zhitel severed a cord that had never been attached. The panel showed green the entire time. A jammer needs a signal to work on, and in the 90 seconds it takes an FP2 to cross the last 3 miles, that aircraft transmits nothing and receives nothing. 90 seconds of perfect jamming against silence still ends with the drone exactly where it meant to be. That should have ended the problem. It didn't, and the reason had nothing to do with electronic warfare. The Russians had moved the bridge, not far, 300 yards along the bank, a routine relocation done days earlier, the kind of thing engineers do when the current starts working at an anchorage. 300 yards is nothing to a truck driver. To an aircraft flying a route programmed from a week-old reconnaissance image, 300 yards is a complete miss. The drones were inbound on coordinates that no longer had a bridge under them, but a pontoon crossing has 2 ends, and the ends do not move. The floating deck can be unpinned and walked down the shoreline in an afternoon. The approach ramp cannot. That is graded earth and compacted fill, days of work by heavy machinery, and when you abandon 100 yards of it, the old cut stays exactly where it was. A raw scar across the salt flats, with a fresh one beside it running to the new anchorage. Seen from above, at night, in thermal, an earthen ramp that has carried loaded trucks all day is not subtle. It is the warmest, straightest line for miles. Change the lock and leave the footpath. The door moves, the trail to it does not. The terminal cameras were never looking for a bridge. They were looking for the road that had to end at 1. 4 aircraft found the scar and followed it down to the water. 3 of them turned onto the new bearing with 11 seconds of flight left. And on the deck, 300 yards from where anyone had planned for it to be, the lead tanker was 2/3 of the way across. 11 seconds. The convoy was moving at 15 miles an hour, which is what you do on pontoons. 31 vehicles closed up tight, the lead tanker 2/3 across, the last of them still on the northern ramp with the queue stacked behind it on the approach road. Nose to tail, no gaps. On a floating bridge, you keep the load spread and you keep it moving, and both of those rules were about to work against everyone following them. 8 seconds. Nothing on the deck new. There is no siren for this. The aircraft came out of a dark quarter of the sky with the wind off the flats covering the sound, and the first indication anyone had was the last one. The Warhead came down on the lead tanker at the midpoint of the span. A fuel tanker does not detonate. It opens, the shell splits along its length, and several thousand gallons come out at once, and on a flat deck with no camber and no drainage, that fuel goes everywhere, running fore and aft along the roadway, finding the seams between sections, pooling in the joints. Then it found the heat, and the whole midsection lit at once. Now the physics stopped being about the warhead. Burning fuel on a steel deck is a hot plate laid on a float. The pontoon sections underneath were holding hundreds of tons in the water because they were sealed and full of air, and air expands, and welded seams open, and the sections began taking water from above and below at the same time. 2 of them settled. The deck between them dropped 6 feet and stopped being a road. Drivers got out and ran for the north bank. Most of them made it. The vehicles did not. The second warhead came down on the northern ramp. That was the exit. With the midsection burning and the ramp cratered, 20-odd vehicles sat on a strip of floating steel with fire ahead of them and no ground behind them. There is no turning around on 20 feet of deck. There is no reversing a closed-up column onto a single-lane causeway. Everything on that bridge stayed on that bridge. Ammunition went next. Not all at once, in sequence, truck by truck as the fire walked down the line, each one opening the next. The cables were last. A pontoon crossing is a chain of hulls pinned bow to stern and held against the current by anchor lines, and it survives on the assumption that all of it stays connected. 2 sections down, and the load transferred to the cables on either side. They held for a while, then one parted, and the Syvash took the free end and began swinging the whole chain broadside, and the rest went the way anything goes once it stops being a bridge and becomes debris in moving water. You do not have to sink a raft chain. You cut one line. The Syvash does the rest. By 0244, the crossing was a burning line bent 30 degrees out of true, anchored at one end and drifting at the other, under a column of fire standing 380 feet over water that reflected every bit of it. Russia had built the bridge, Russia had loaded it, and what Russia carried across it was what burned it down. Add up the ledger. 6 airframes went out. None were built to come back, and none did. 2 were shot down cleanly on the approach. Set that against what was left on the water at first light. A crossing bent out of true and drifting. Most of a convoy burned down to frames on the deck. The northern ramp cratered. And 1 aircraft still unaccounted for. 4 found the ramp scar that night. 3 turned for the bridge. The 4th never did. It carried on inland to an assembly yard 600 yards from the bank, where the spare pontoon sections were stacked, the only material within a day's drive that could have rebuilt any of this, and it arrived there before the tanker was hit, so the crossing was already beyond repair while it was still standing. The fire only settled the paperwork. Those numbers are a reconstruction, not a filing. What is documented is narrower, and says the same thing. Aikold recorded that the pontoon crossings built at damaged bridges came under Ukrainian fire during June, and that when Russia shifted to sea routes across the Azov instead, vessels on those routes were being struck by July. The fire followed the repair, and then it followed the workaround. A concrete bridge can be repaired, slowly, badly, under fire, but repaired, and 1 lane comes back. A pontoon crossing cannot be repaired. It can only be replaced. And replacement means hauling new sections in from somewhere else, along the same broken roads, to be assembled at the same coordinates. That is the trap Russia never got out of. The approach roads run to one place. Move the deck 300 yards, and the ramps still have to end where the ramps end. Every rebuild goes back to the spot the last one died on. The last time we looked at this corridor, it ended on a subtraction problem. A defense that intercepted well and lost the bridge anyway, because a structure only has to be hit once. This ends somewhere colder. A bridge has to be destroyed once. A pontoon crossing has to survive every single night. That asymmetry does not care how good the crews are. Move the Tor, reload it, put it on a better bearing, and it is still one launcher covering 500 feet of deck and a mile of stacked road. Keep the Zhitel running, and it will keep cutting a link the incoming aircraft were never using. None of that is incompetence. It is a defensive problem with no correct answer, being solved correctly, every night, indefinitely, against an opponent who needs one night to go right. And Russia has to keep loading it. A crossing nobody drives over is not a supply line. The moment it starts carrying weight is the moment it becomes worth hitting. And the heavier the convoy, the better the target. Russia was not only guarding the bridge, Russia was fueling the thing that burned it. The engineers will build another one. Same water, same ramps, same schedule. The water has not moved. Neither have the ramps, and neither has the list. Subscribe if this is the kind of breakdown you want more of, and tell me in the comments if every crossing you rebuild has to go back on the exact spot the last one burned. At what point do you stop rebuilding, and what does an army do then?